Take your Bibles and turn with me to Exodus chapter number 6. Continuing our study of children of Israel being delivered from Egyptian captivity. And I hope that you came here today prepared to hear some good news, because it's really all I've got for you today. I've got buckets and buckets of good news, because today's story, I believe that you'll be able to see, is a description of God's profound patience and long-suffering and mercy, all in the face of our faithlessness and idolatry and complaining. That's good news. As we look at chapter 6, I want you to see where we left Moses. He had confronted Pharaoh and made his demand that the people were to be let go so that they could worship the Lord. And the Pharaoh responded to that command by saying, obviously these people have too much time on their hands. And so he increased their workload. And this caused the people of Israel to turn on Moses, which was Moses' great fear all along. So once again, we see at the end of chapter 5, and maybe that's where we should start, just reading a couple of verses out of the end of chapter 5. Because we find Moses going back to complaining that God had chosen him. And really what he's doing is he ends chapter 5 by telling God, all of this is your fault for picking me. Exodus 5, verse 22. Then Moses turned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Now, let's back up. It was Pharaoh that increased their workload. But he's blaming God for it. Why did you ever send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all. Pretty bold. Same old for Moses, though. This is him doubting himself. Except in this moment, he's actually putting some blame on God for it. He said, I told you I wasn't the man for the job, and now look at what happened. You did this. This is all your fault. Everybody's blaming me, but I'm going to blame you. Now, I don't know what your thoughts are about what God's response should be right there. I think of myself, and if somebody spoke to me like that, I don't know how gracious I would be. I don't know how kind I would be in that moment. But I want you to know, before we even get into this chapter, that God's response to him is kinder, gentler, more faithful, and more gracious than you could ever possibly imagine. In the face of the people of God actually thinking that Pharaoh was more powerful. That was Israel's issue. They had already gone back in chapter 5 and started calling themselves the servants of Pharaoh. So they thought Pharaoh was more powerful than their God. And also in the face of Moses, thinking that his shortcomings were more powerful than God. God reminds Moses, and through that is going to remind the people what is really more powerful. And that is a sovereign God and his plans and his purposes. So I want you to look in Exodus chapter number 6, beginning in verse 1. But the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand he will send them out And with a strong hand, he will drive them out of this land. He's saying, I'm going to bring Pharaoh to the point that he drives the children of Israel out of his land. God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord. That's the word Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob as God Almighty, El Shaddai. But by my name, the Lord, Yahweh, I did not make myself known to him. Now, that on its face is confusing, because he did make himself known as Yahweh. He shared his name with the patriarchs. They knew him by the name Yahweh. But I think what he's really trying to get across right here is that I'm about to show you things about what it means to be the I am that no one has ever seen before. I'm going to reveal things about myself to this generation that previous generations have never known about. And that's saying a lot, given all that he promised the previous generations. Look at verse 4. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as sojourners. Moreover, I've heard the groaning of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians hold as slaves, and I've remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord. That is the name Yahweh. I am. Now, this is where this passage gets so incredibly good. Right here in verse 6. I want you to listen to these I will statements in these next few verses. And I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and great acts of judgment. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. He's making these declarations. And church, I hope you can hear me when I say this. He's making these declarations first. That's the first act. He's the first actor. He is declaring, I am going to do some things. And then he describes what's going to happen. He says, I will be your God, and you shall know that I'm the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. God is saying, I'm going to do all of these things, and then you will know. I want to thank God that He didn't wait until I knew to start doing His I wills. Well, that is good news, y'all. He did not wait until I know before He decided He was going to do I will. He did all those I will things so that I would come to know. You say, why is He doing all of these things that He's going to do to Egypt? Why is He going to bring them out of Egypt with all of this judgment on the nation of Israel, or on the nation of Egypt? Why is He doing it that way? Here's why. He's doing it so that the people of Israel, His covenant people that He has put His love on, will know. It's all about capturing their hearts and their minds. Listen as it continues. I will bring you into the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord. Y'all, that right there is some 200 proof good news. Uncut, unadulterated, undiluted good news. God is saying, I will do this because I am. And there's no qualifiers. There's no ifs and there's no buts. He's not saying, I will if you. He's not saying, I will, but I need. He's just saying, I will. And because I will, it's going to cause you to know something. Friends, it's good news. But the people of Israel are just like us. They struggled to hear good news. They struggled to believe it was true. On its face, that's the kind of news right there that sounds entirely too good to be true. When you hear news that sounds too good to be true from the Scripture, you're probably hearing the gospel, and you're probably hearing it clearly. Because it is too good to be true. You hear it and you think, how can it be possible that God loves me and He loves me in spite of me? That's one of the things I mentioned from Packer when he's describing God and God being love. One of the reasons that he's emphasizing that is that since God is love and He made a choice to put His love on His children, that means that His love is not dictated by His children. His love is dictated by the choice He made. He made a choice to love. And when He made a choice to love, He did so fully knowing you. Here's the thing. Have you ever thought you disappointed Him? Do you think He had some thought about who you are? And then all of a sudden He had a golly, I can't believe they just did that. I didn't see that one a-coming. Or do you think He knew everything about you when He made His mind up to love you? He knew how sorry you were going to be sometimes. He knew how sorry I was going to be sometimes. And He made the choice to love. He made the choice. He said, I will. And He said, I will, in order to bring us to a place that we might know that He is the Lord our God. Moses spoke, verse 9, thus to the people of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and harsh slavery. Now, I want to be really careful here, because there's going to be some times in the coming weeks when I'm going to beat up on the people of Israel because they're going to have it a-coming. I'm going to call them out, and I'm going to describe them as trifling. And then I'm going to get all of us to identify with them. Okay? But right here, I want to be really careful, because the tenor of this chapter is not rebuke. It's just not. This is an honest moment of description saying these people were broken. They were broken. And broken people have a hard time seeing the truth. They have a hard time hearing the truth. They have a hard time believing good news. And so God does these things so that our hearts and our spirits might be healed up, so that the blinders might come off, so that we might actually see Him for who He actually is and be healed by it. He's describing these people here rejecting this good news, but they're doing it because they're broken, just like we can be. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Look at verse 10. So the Lord said to Moses, go in, tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the people of Israel go out of his land. But Moses said to the Lord, behold, the people of Israel have not listened to me. How then shall Pharaoh listen to me? For I'm of uncircumcised lips, unclean lips, unsanctified lips. He's still hung up on something about his inability to speak well. Here it is. He's hung up on himself. He's hung up on his shortcomings. And he thinks that his shortcomings are more powerful than God is. He's looking at himself when he should be looking at the sovereign. He's saying, God, you are powerful, but not powerful enough to overcome the mess of me. So the people of Israel were looking at Pharaoh thinking Pharaoh was more powerful. Moses was looking at himself thinking that his failures were more powerful. Everybody in this story is acting like there's something more powerful than God. And here God in mercy, in great faithfulness, in graciousness is saying, listen y'all, I am and I will, and that's going to cause you to know. I'm not going to demand that you know right now. I am and I will. These people, you think that Pharaoh is more powerful than me? Okay. Hold on for a minute. I'm about to assault every single god they have, and I'm going to humiliate them. I'm going to assault the Nile, their fertility gods. I'm going to assault all of them, and I'm going to break them, and I'm going to humiliate them in front of everybody. I'm going to let you know Pharaoh is not more powerful. He said, Moses, I'm going to use you in spite of yourself. You're going to get in there and you're going to do what I tell you to do, and you're not going to have any expectation that it's going to work. However, I've chosen to use you. There's a reason that he chose to use Moses. It's because Moses was a broken vessel just like the broken people of Israel were. If you look at Moses and you have some idea, and maybe I've already busted that up, that you thought Moses was some kind of amazing guy, and that's why God chose him, that he was just, wow, he's like the most righteous, the most set-apart person on the planet, and that's why God picked him. Not at all. To this point, basically what he's done is argue with God. He's proven himself to be incredibly faithless, and honestly, God got upset with him and was going to do some harm to him because he refused to obey, and his wife stepped in and circumcised his son. And even here, he's saying, "I've got uncircumcised lips. I'm not able, and this is your fault, God." Moses was not qualified in himself. It was God who qualified him. And so I say, thank God that the Lord was undeterred by their faithlessness. And their faithlessness did not control his demeanor, and it did not control his actions. He had purposed to do something, and it wasn't dependent upon them being awesome. Look at verse 13. But the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them a charge about the people of Israel and about the Pharaoh king of Egypt, to bring the people out of the land of Egypt. Basically, he said, I've heard all your complaints, just go do what I told you to do. Now at this point, the passage kind of gets odd because it turns to a genealogy. Now, I don't know how many of you all are excited about genealogies. I'm typically confused by them at first glance. Had to do quite a bit of reading, quite a bit of thinking about this genealogy. I had some questions as I went to this passage. Why is this genealogy here? What's the point of having it? Why does it list those it lists, but it's not a complete genealogy? And anytime you see a genealogy, especially in the Old Testament, just know they're not trying to be complete, and they're not just trying to tell you the people who were the players leading up to it. They're trying to make a point, and they're going to make that point by who they pick and who they leave out. It's not meant to be a complete genealogy. And so I want to sum up the next 12 verses that, you could do the same thing if you just gave it a quick glance. But the next 12 verses in genealogy is really mostly about Aaron. It begins by talking about the sons of Jacob. And then it describes the first three sons, and it stops at Levi. Levi, who didn't have an inheritance of land. Then it traces Levi to Aaron, because Aaron and Moses are of the tribe of Levi. And then it traces Aaron to his grandson, Phineas. So it goes back a part of the way, and then it goes forward a couple of generations, and it's focused mainly around Aaron and not just Moses. Now, there's a lot of conjecture about why this is here, but here's what I think. I believe this genealogy is put here to illustrate the fact that Moses and Aaron were broken men from a broken lineage, and that we should not think they were chosen because there was something specially unique about them. I want you to look at some of the people mentioned in this lineage. The first one is Reuben. Reuben, hear me, had sex with his father's wife while his father was still alive. If I'm trying to impress you with how awesome Moses is, I'm leaving Reuben out of the genealogy. Moses' own father, I'm not going to take the time to read through it, but just trust me, it says it very clearly. He married his aunt. I don't even know what you call her after that. Nephew and husband. He married his aunt. Family trees have always supposed to have forked. Always. Korah is mentioned. Korah is going to become famous a little bit later on because Korah is going to lead a rebellion against Moses and be swallowed by the earth. Aaron's own sons that are mentioned here, Nadab and Abihu, are going to offer strange fire before God, and God is going to consume them with fire. He's going to kill them for it. That didn't even get back to what we already know is true about the previous people in genealogy. We spent a long time in Genesis. Abraham married his half-sister, and then he gave her away to save his own hide, not once, but twice. Jacob married two sisters and openly despised one of them. Another one of Jacob's sons, Judah, had sex with his daughter-in-law. Now, granted, he thought he was just having sex with a prostitute. That makes it so much better, right? Y'all, if I were trying to build a case for who was the most qualified, I would have left these people out. But I want to thank God that those people are in the story. I want to thank God that people like Moses and Aaron are in the story. Because we are people like Moses and Aaron. The point, I think, is that God, His work always moves forward through broken people. Because that's all who are available. Listen to verse 26. And as you read verse 26 at the end of this genealogy, I hope that I want to conjecture that when you read it, you should inflect within it some shock, some amazement, some incredulity. Look at verse 26. These are the Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, bring out the people of Israel from the land of Egypt by their hosts. It was they, these guys whose family tree didn't fork, who are the product of incest. These guys, they who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing out the people of Israel from Egypt. And this Moses and this Aaron. Broken people who don't have a good pedigree and are in no way qualified, just like you and just like me. I pray you can hear it. It's these guys. The reason that they're being used is not because they qualified themselves, and everything about their actions to this point should reveal that. Everything about their heritage to this point should reveal that. The reason that they're being used is because God made a sovereign choice. And when God chooses someone, that is the thing that qualifies them. That is true for both salvation and it is true for ministry. In the final verses of chapter 6, on the day when the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, the Lord said to Moses, I'm the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I say to you. But Moses said to the Lord, behold, I'm of uncircumcised lips. How will Pharaoh listen to me? That's a good question. Here's a good answer. But God. You see, it isn't about whether or not the people of Israel believe. And Moses, it isn't even about whether or not you believe. Here's the fact. I'm going to do it in spite of the fact that nobody believes. God is saying, I will. And I'm going to keep I willing until I bring you to the place that you know. Y'all, that's some good news. I've been telling you I want you to have high expectations. But I want those high expectations to be about who God is, not because of who you think you might be. See, God's plan was not based on the faith of Moses or the Israelites. It was always based on His sovereign choice. It was always based on the previous promises that He had made. It was always based on His power bringing it to pass. And it was always going to be requiring His persevering love. When the circumstances of their life were screaming so loudly that they couldn't hear the good news, when Israel and Moses could not hear the good news, God patiently endured and persisted with all of them. And that's the same good news of the gospel, that God saved us neither because of us nor in spite of us. He saved us irregardless of us. Irrespective of us, God made a choice to save and He saved. And that's good news. I want you to look at real quickly as the last thing we do this morning, to look back quickly at those I will verses from 6, 7, and 8. Because they are gospel saturated. In verse 6, He said, I will deliver, I will set you free. That is a New Testament equivalent of saying, I will save. Paul told the Galatians that He gave Himself, that is Jesus, He gave Himself to rescue us from this evil age. It is Jesus who delivers us from evil. Jesus did that for us based entirely on His design and His plan. He saved us on the cross from the consequences of sin. And I'm so grateful for it. The wrath of God that I deserved was poured out on Jesus on the cross. And as a consequence, the wrath of God, as it pertains to His children, has now been exhausted. It is gone. And so he paid the price to deliver us from those consequences. And now He is at work in us to deliver us from the present power of sin. Now that doesn't mean that happens instantly, but He is contending with us. He's contending for us to try and lead us and mature us and guide us so that we stop making the choice to do the thing that harms us and start making the choice to do the thing that brings eternal and abundant life. And He's committed. He who began a good work in you will be faithful to bring it to completion. And I'm really glad that He's going to be faithful to do that, because I haven't always been in agreement with that good work He started in me. I often choose my own way. But He continues to contend. So He has saved me from the consequences of my sin. He is at work right now saving me from the power of sin in this world. And one day, He's going to bring me home to Himself and save me from the very presence of sin. He is going to save me in every way that I can be saved. Every way that you can be saved. When He brings us to Himself and we live with Him in holiness. Every way that we can be set free, He is at work setting us free. He said, I will. And hear me, friends, that I will isn't dependent upon you. He made a choice to do that. And He's going to stick with that decision. He said in verse 6 as well, I will redeem. What a great Bible word. I think it's the second time it's used in the Bible. I think it was used once in reference back in Jacob's ladder, but this is the second time that it's used here. He's saying, I will redeem. Redeeming means you pay a price so that somebody else can be free. I had a professor in college who worked to translate the Bible in an African country, and in their dialect, he was helping them to translate this. And whenever they came across the word redeemed, their word for this was that that it would loose the neck. And he was a little confused by that until they explained it to him, but that to them, back when they were taken into slavery, someone could come along and pay a price to set them free, and they would have their necks loosed from the chain that had them bound. That's the picture of redemption. That somebody is paying a price to loose your neck and set you free from the slavery that you're bound in by sin and death. In Hebrew, that person who came along was known as a redeemer, a kinsman redeemer, a goel, who was normally a member of your wider family who acted to protect when there was some type of situation. They were family protectors. They were family champions. And if a member of the family was murdered, the goel would come to see that that guilty person was found and brought to justice. When a kinsman fell into debt and was forced to sell land, a better off kinsman would come in and would take responsibility to purchase that land so that it would be kept in the family. In a situation that if it was bad enough that a kinsman had to go into prison because of the debt that they owed, the kinsman would come in and act in a way to rescue that person from their servitude. If a man died without a son to inherit his name, it was the kinsman's job to take that descendant's widow and seek to raise an heir for them. I pray that you hear it. That in this story, God is saying, I'm going to be your redeemer. I'm going to be your family protector. I'm going to be your kinsman champion. In Exodus, God is saying, I'm going to come to the aid of my people, and I'm going to redeem you from this situation so that you might be the people I have on this earth who is going to bring forth the great Redeemer who is yet to come. Jesus came from Israel, and He is now our great kinsman redeemer, our great champion, because He has intervened on our behalf and paid the debt that we owed so that we might be free. He paid that debt with His own blood and His own life and made us free in Him. Verse 7 says, I will take you as my people. That's language of adoption. 1 John 3:1 says, look how great a love the Father has given us that we should be called God's children. And we are. You see, He didn't just set you free and leave you off to your own resources. He set you free and then adopted you and brought you into the family. Made you His child. In verse 8, it says, I'll bring you into the land. That's statement of inheritance. That promise was fulfilled, and it will be fulfilled again in the world to come. Peter tells us in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 4, that by Jesus' resurrection, we have an inheritance that is imperishable, uncorrupted, unfading, kept in heaven for all of us. It's good news. Friends, those are just 4 of them. I pray that you can hear. He is saying, I will, and He makes that decision regardless. He makes that decision, and it's those I will things that He's going to do. He's going to save us. He's going to redeem us. He's going to bring us into the family. He's going to give us an inheritance. He's doing all of these things so that we will come to the place where we recognize that He is who He said He is. It's the kindness of God that brings us to repentance. Now, I don't want you to hear something I'm not saying today. I'm not looking at you and saying that, since God's going to do everything that it takes to save you, that you should really just go out and do whatever strikes your fancy to do. Just live however you want to. I don't look at the children of Israel and think, wow, God's being very understanding with them right now, so they should just keep on living in unbelief. Moses should keep on challenging God at every other turn. You don't look at this story and think, wow, that's just a good move and he should keep doing that. In fact, don't you cringe just a little bit when you hear some of the things that Moses says to God? Just know, you don't need to talk like that, dude. You probably shouldn't do that. God is showing incredible mercy right now. And I'm grateful for that. There's going to come a time in the days ahead where mercy is going to turn to discipline. And honestly, discipline really is an aspect of His mercy. He's working to change us, but there's a better way than discipline, friends. I'm really not looking at you today and saying that it's okay. And I heard there's a church in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and for years their motto was, it's okay to not be okay, it's just not okay to stay not okay. The call that I hope you're hearing today is not that it's okay for you to be how you are forever. What I hope you hear is the gospel call that says, I've made a decision to make you a child, and that didn't depend on you. But hear the invitation today to be more than you are right now. Moses was more than a stutterer. He couldn't see past it. I don't know what your issue might be that you struggle to see past. You say, but maybe I'm an adulterer. Maybe I'm a thief. Maybe I'm eaten alive with anger. Well, stop it. You know what the cure for adultery is? Stop committing adultery. The anger thing, you probably just need to bite your tongue until it bleeds and stick your hands in your pocket. It's like I'm a thief. Quit taking stuff that ain't yours. This ain't rocket surgery here. Okay? Furthermore, let me tell you that the same God who saved you knew all those things about you when He saved you, when He called you. But I hope that you hear He's calling you to be more than those things right now. And it's not just so that you'll line up with what He says is the right way to be. It's because you recognize that when He says don't do this, and don't do this, it's because He knows that those things are not in your design. You're using your life in a way that it was never designed to be used. And when you stop doing those things, it actually is going to preserve life and add beauty to life. Holiness is a whole lot more than just discipline. It's recognizing the beauty in His way. And so, I don't want you to hear a message like I'm giving today and you walk away saying, Pastor Brian said that God's just going to do it and what I do don't matter whatsoever. Well, I pray you hear me. If God has made His mind up to love you, He's going to love you. There ain't no two ways about it. But there's more than one way to walk this life. The children of Israel and Moses are going to come under some discipline here in a while. Moses is actually going to come. You see, that short temper that Moses has got where he decides it's like, I'm just going to kill this dude. Bury him in sand. Where he's going to pipe off to God just, it's like, this is your fault. Well, one day God's going to tell him to do something and he's going to say, go touch the rock, and he's going to strike the rock, and God's going to say, you're still mine, but you're not going in the promised land now. I'll bring you to heaven, but you're not going to take these people in. Okay, that was discipline that didn't have to happen. The people of Israel, I think God always knew they were going to wander in the desert for 40 years, but hear me, they could have just said, God, you're right, let's go in, but they didn't do that. There's going to come a time when they're like, I am sick to death of eating manna. And so God's going to send them pigeons and nothing else. It's discipline. It's not always, nice. Sometimes it's very severe. But hear me, it doesn't have to be the way. So I do want you to hear me today that, boy, I want to tell you, God has decided, if you're His, He's decided to love you. That's the thing that just affects everything. But hear it not as an invitation to quit, to keep living below your standard. That's not what I'm saying. Hear it as an invitation to become who He created you to be. There's nothing that holds you back from that. Because Pharaoh is not more powerful. Your deficits are not more powerful. His power to save, His power to redeem, His power to adopt, His power to give you an inheritance, His power to put you on the side of mercy and not judgment. Those things are more powerful. I pray that your ears would be able to hear and that you would be encouraged by that truth.